Before we start today's case, I just want to point out that no victim blaming will be tolerated in the comment section. If you are familiar with my other channel, Irish Coffee True Crime, you'll know I can be a bit sassy and will take immediate action. With that said, let's begin. This case is based in Auckland, New Zealand. It is a city based around two harbours and is situated in the north of New Zealand's North Island. In the centre, the iconic Sky Tower has views of Viaduct Harbour, which is full of super yachts and lined with bars and cafes. It is a multicultural hub of food, wine, music, art and culture. It has beautiful rainforests, parks and beaches, all very close to the city centre. Grace Emmy Rose Millane was born on the 2nd of December 1996 and grew up in Wickford, Essex in England, 35 miles east of London. Her family consisted of her parents David and Gillian and older brothers Michael and Declan, so she was the baby of the family. In 2018, Grace graduated from the University of Lincoln with a bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing. After finishing university, her plan was to backpack around the world, and her first port of call was to Peru, where she spent 6 weeks in South America. Then, on the 20th of November 2018, she entered New Zealand and began travelling around the upper north end of the island, arriving in Auckland on the 30th of November. Grace was 21 years of age in 2018 and was described as very sociable, lively, close to her family, and she loved art and being creative. During her stay in South America, she met up with many other backpackers and stayed in contact with her family and friends throughout her journey, constantly updating her Facebook page and direct messaging them. Even though she was travelling on her own, she never felt alone, as there were so many others in the same position as her, and so they would automatically gravitate to each other, making new contacts and new friends. When Grace arrived in Auckland, she booked herself into a hostel called the Base Backpackers Hostel, and it was situated on Queen Street. Settled into her accommodation and finding her feet, Grace had decided to go on Tinder to see if she could click with someone to go out with and show her the sights of the city. Finally, she matched with someone and began chatting with him. It was the 1st of December, the day before her 22nd birthday. Soon she was making arrangements to meet up for drinks and a bite to eat. They arranged to meet at the famous Sky Tower. It was a highly public place and the sort of location where Grace would feel safe to meet someone. Grace arrived early and took photographs of all the festive decorations, including a photograph of the Christmas tree, which she would send to her parents, the last communication they would ever have with their daughter. When the two arrived, they recognised each other almost immediately, and the man gave Grace a hug after they smiled and moved towards each other. Their first stop was a burger restaurant and bar on the first floor of the adjacent Sky City complex. When they got there, they went up the escalator to Andy's bar, where they ordered cocktails at the bar and then moved to a table. There they talked and laughed and got to know each other a little better. Grace being very animated, talking with her hands and laughing, telling this man of her adventures and the different people she had met. The man seemed totally engaged in the conversation and no red flags were showing, even picking up the tab before they left. Their entire time in this place would be captured on camera. An hour and a half later, having left Andy's bar, the pair headed to a restaurant less than a block away, the Mexican Cafe. After another hour and a half and nearly 2 jugs of margarita downed, the pair leave here, with the man again picking up the tab, which I'm sure impressed Grace, leaving her feeling that this man was really into her, along with good conversation, good banter and sparks flying between them. They next went to the Bluestone Room, a bar which was this man's local, right next to the City Life Hotel, where he was currently living. The man seemed to be comfortable in this environment as he chatted to the barman when ordering the drinks. Grace seemed happy also and still animated as they both sat at a table. At 8:40 p.m. the man makes his move on Grace. He puts his hand behind her head and pulls it towards his, kissing her for a second or so. Over the next hour they kiss several times more, only stopping briefly when the man steps out of view of the cameras and Grace uses her phone to send a message to her friend saying, "I click with him so well. He's an oil manager and lives in a hotel. I'll let you know what happens tomorrow." Returning to the table, Grace then steps out of the view of the camera, with the man now using his phone to post a message on Grace's Facebook under her new profile picture she just posted. He also grabs Grace's purse and rifles through it. For what reason, it is unknown. Soon after 9:30 p.m, footage would show them both leaving together and heading to the lobby of the City Life Hotel, where they enter the lift with the man fumbling for his keycard as they head towards room 308. This is the last time Grace would be seen alive. And the man who lived in room 308 and who had wined and dined Grace was Jesse Kempson. Exactly what happened in that room after they arrived isn't known, as we only have Kempson to tell us. But what is known is he did nothing to help Grace and did everything to get rid of the body and cover his tracks. At 1:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, the 2nd of December, and Grace's birthday, as she lay dead on the bedroom floor, Kempson carried out several internet searches, which indicated not just how unconcerned he was about Grace's death, but how he was actively plotting to conceal it. Using his phone, he looked up hottest fires and Waitakere ranges, the location where he would later try to bury Grace in a shallow grave. He also trawled porn sites and watched them. The most despicable thing he did was to take several photographs of Grace's dead body, including close-ups and manipulating her body to get the shots he wanted. Meanwhile, Grace's family were inundating her phone with happy birthday messages, but they were getting nothing back. This to them was unusual. Grace never went a day without being in contact with her family, and this was her birthday. They checked her Facebook page and nothing had been posted since the night before. They also checked with her friends and they had heard nothing from Grace either. Later that morning, with Grace still lying dead on the floor of room 308, Kempson texted another woman he had met on Tinder, trying to arrange a date for later that day. The woman, a former journalist who can't be named, but who, like Kempson, was 26 years old, met him later that day at a bar called Revelry. He told her that all his friends were police officers and his closest friend was coming to New Zealand to be a Crown prosecutor. Discussing a murder trial she once attended, he told her it's crazy how guys can make one wrong move and go to jail for the rest of their life. He then went on to say that he had heard about a guy who asked his girlfriend to have rough sex, but it had gone wrong and she had died in the process. The woman, feeling uncomfortable, changed the topic to travelling in the South Island. Kempson continued to tell several lies during their conversation, and she became even more uneasy. When she left the bar, she avoided walking directly back to her car. He later texted her asking for another date, which she turned down. So who was Jesse Kempson? He was born in Wellington, the capital of New Zealand. He was a product of divorced parents, and because of this he was moved from place to place quite a lot as a child, being mostly reared by his grandparents, and he was estranged from most of his family. People that knew him described him as a pathological liar that wouldn't know the truth if it hit him in the face. He constantly told tall tales, from being the cousin of an All Blacks rugby player. He lied to employers, girlfriends, landlords, family and friends. He created a persona as a successful individual and posted on Facebook this lie. But his life was the complete opposite. He could not hold down a job because of his lies. He was constantly being evicted by landlords for not paying his rent and could not keep friends again because of his lies. Even though he was staying in a hotel, it was being paid for by state benefits, and not because he was a manager of Woolworths, as he had told the people around him. He would lose his final job on the day he met Grace, due again to his lies. Grace's family reported her missing on the 5th of December, and immediately the police reached out to the hostel she was staying in. They confirmed that she had not been seen since the 1st of December, and had not checked in since then either. All her belongings were still in her room. It didn't take long for the police to discover where Grace had been on the evening of the 1st of December. They would collect over 6 terabytes of CCTV footage in the coming days, and were able to follow Grace around the city from the time she left the hostel. The man she was with that night was quickly identified and invited to the police station to help find Grace. After Grace had changed her profile picture on Facebook the night of the 1st, a comment was made 11 minutes after by none other than Jesse Kempson, saying, "Beautiful, very radiant." The police presumed it was the same man seen in the CCTV footage with Grace. Tracing back his footsteps, they found him in the Blue Storm bar that was right next to his hotel and where he would bring Grace that night. Before meeting up with Grace, he was here and had downed 4 bottles of beer in the space of a half an hour. The police knew that he was the last known person to be seen with Grace that night, and they needed to speak to him. Days later, after Grace went missing, Kempson was invited to the police station to be interviewed for the first time. Kempson turned up at the station the next morning and told police that he had met Grace, but they had parted ways at 10 p.m. on the night of the 1st, and that it was the last he saw of her. That he had messaged her the next day but found she had blocked him. Of course, this was all untrue. By now, Grace's father was in Auckland and police set up a press conference for David to ask the public for help. The police did announce that they had a person of interest in relation to Grace's disappearance, and he had been interviewed, but he could not be named. The following day, after being released and the police having looked through more footage, they phoned Kempson again to come in for another interview that evening. But before he came in, the police were at his hotel in the lobby. At the same time, Kempson was returning to his hotel, and upon seeing the police, he did a U-turn and walked away from the hotel. Police, not expecting him to be there, spotted him and went after him, tracking him down in a shop nearby, and it was then they brought him in for questioning. The CCTV footage they had acquired proved that he had lied in his first interview, and that is why they were so keen to bring him in. By the time his second interview took place, he had no choice but to admit to killing Grace. But it was not murder, it was an accident. He told police where they could find Grace's body. He claimed that Grace had asked him to choke her while being intimate. Meanwhile, the police were searching his room, and with the help of luminol, they knew something terrible had happened to Grace. It was more than an accident. CCTV footage would show that after Grace and Kempson left the Blue Storm bar, they both went to Kempson's hotel, entered the lift and made their way to his room. The morning after, at 8 a.m, cameras picked up Kempson entering the elevator, exiting it in the lobby and leaving the hotel. The police followed him through CCTV footage over the next few hours. He went shopping to buy a suitcase and then returned to the hotel to drop it off. 15 minutes later, he left the hotel once more and bought cleaning products in a nearby supermarket. At 9:33 a.m, he got a taxi to a car hire company and rented a red car, returning to the hotel at 11 a.m. That evening, he met up with his Tinder date at 4 p.m, the ex-journalist. After his Tinder date, Kempson returned to his hotel at around 5:45 p.m. At around 8 p.m, he went to rent a carpet cleaner, telling the person in the shop it was to clean red wine he had spilt on a carpet. At around 9:30 p.m, Kempson is seen entering the elevator once more, wheeling a trolley with 2 suitcases on board, bringing them to the car he had rented and putting both cases in the boot of the car, leaving them overnight. At around 6:15 a.m. Monday the 3rd, Kempson is seen going into a hardware store on the outskirts of Auckland. At first, he is seen looking at bolts and nails, as if to distract staff from what he really wanted to buy, a shovel. At 9:30 a.m, he returns to the hotel and he is barefoot. He then leaves again and gets his clothes washed at a nearby laundrette, and it was then he bought a second suitcase, the exact same type as the one he bought to put Grace into. Before returning the rental car, he brings it to be washed, making sure all the mud is washed off the tires. He also leaves the shovel behind, hoping that someone else will pick it up. The police by now want to speak to him, and this is when he goes about dumping various items in different bins around the city, before returning to the hotel and finding the police there. With everything that was caught on camera, there is not one sign of panic or distress. He is cool, calm and collective. He is in control. Grace's body was found 10 yards in off the road on Scenic Drive in the Waitakere Reservoir. Once news came out that Grace had been found dead, the people of New Zealand were shocked and grieved for her loss and the pain her family were in. Thousands of people gathered and paid tribute to Grace. Vigils were held and flowers were laid where she had been found. Kempson was formally charged with Grace's murder on the 10th of December. It was granted by the court that he wouldn't be named to ensure a fair trial. And while this was valid in New Zealand, it did not extend to abroad, and the foreign newspapers were all too glad to name him. Grace's autopsy showed that she had been strangled, and there was bruising on her arms and chest, showing she had been held down and weight was put on her chest. At the trial, it was said that while she would have gone unconscious quite quickly, it would have taken anything from 5 to 10 minutes for her to die. Just over a month after Grace was found, she was brought home to England by her father and uncle. Grace was brought to the cathedral in Brentwood in Essex. Here, thousands of mourners gathered to pay their respects and support Grace's family. 6 days after Grace was laid to rest, Kempson appeared at the High Court and pled not guilty. In November 2019, his trial began, and it would go on for 3 weeks. Of course, the defence painted a picture of Grace where it was not just implied that Grace orchestrated her own death, but said it was her fault, that she had asked for it, that she was practiced in this type of sex and Kempson wasn't, and it had gone too far because of his inexperience. The prosecution, though, had a mountain of evidence and witnesses to say Kempson was not the innocent that the defence was trying to portray. During his trial, he was described as a sociopath who made some of the women he met on Tinder highly uncomfortable. It later emerged that he took another British tourist out on a Tinder date before bringing her back to his Auckland motel room 8 months before he killed Grace. Kempson raped the tourist, then 21, while she lay on the bed crying and frozen with fear after she refused to have sex with him. She kept the attack secret until she recognised Kempson from media coverage the day he was charged with Grace's murder. She would get a separate trial and Kempson would be found guilty and sentenced to 3.5 years. Another woman Kempson communicated with on Tinder was wary of meeting with him after he shared messages in which he detailed his sexual preferences, saying also why he liked what he liked, that it made him feel superior and in control. Kempson's ex-girlfriend would also come forward, describing what he had put her through, how he had terrorised her over a period of months. He subjected her to violent assaults, threatened her with a butcher's knife and forced her into humiliating sex acts after telling her he had been sent by the CIA to kill her. She too would get her own trial, and Kempson was found guilty and sentenced to 7.5 years. On the 22nd of December 2019, Kempson was found guilty of the murder of Grace and sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 17 years to be served before he could apply for parole. In 2020, his name was released to the public after his appeal for the conviction for the murder of Grace was denied, and the time had lapsed for the suppression of his name. After the trial for the murder of Grace, Kempson had his other 2 trials that I mentioned already. Those sentences amounted to 11 years in total and were to run concurrently with the life sentence he already received. In November 2020, Grace's dad passed away from cancer. He had been diagnosed after the trial, and I think it is safe to say that Kempson is responsible for his death also. In 2024, Grace's mother Gillian climbed to Mount Everest Base Camp in memory of her daughter and to raise money to support the White Ribbon campaign, a campaign to help end male violence against women. It took the team 8 days to reach the camp and 4 days to get back down. Gillian left a stone engraved with Grace's name at the top, alongside one with David's name. She had previously left stones with their names at the top of Kilimanjaro. After Grace's death, she also began collecting handbags and filling them with toiletries for domestic violence victims, inspired by Grace's love for handbags. The charity initiative is called Love Grace, and it has filled over 20,000 bags for women across the UK and the world. Gillian, for her efforts, received an OBE. Rest in peace, Grace and David.